I remember the first time that I was introduced to the March family. I was 10 years old and I was instantly enamored of this picturesque yet flawed and unified family. Meg and Beth and Amy were like the sisters that I didn't have, and Jo was like, she was so creative and self-sufficient, and I felt like I wanted to be like her. These women in Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, which is her semi-autobiographical novel, were like a role model to me growing up. And as my coming of age, I felt like I wanted to live my life in the way that they did, in family and in being strong. Little Women, which was first printed in 1868, sold out in less than a month and has not been out of print since then. The four March sisters with whom the world fell in love in this story was based on Louisa May Alcott's own family. It's based on their own dysfunction and the unity within her family, on her own struggles with the societal and political spheres of her time, the barriers that she had within them, and on her own rise to success despite the elements that prohibited her. Now, a successful fiction writer and Alcott enthusiast, Susan Straight, said that the reason that the March family is so endearing to people across the world and through generations is because they're as real to us as our own flawed selves. This is primarily because Alcott is not talking about sensational caricatures of people as was popular in the day. She's talking about her own family. So that family, the Alcotts, Louisa was born in Germantown, Pennsylvania, November 29th of 1832. She was the second daughter of Bronson and Abigail Alcott. And her father, who was a political transcendentalist philosopher and a political activist, was had a little struggle with making money in his chosen field, so he kind of moved the family around a lot, and they ended up eventually in Concord, Massachusetts, which is the scene of Little Women, and which is also where her family was. So in Concord, Massachusetts, her father started a school which, like Mr. March, was closed down because he admitted African American students into the school, which was way against the politics of the time. And while they were there, they conversed and visited with people like Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry David Thoreau, and the girls played at Walden Pond, and it was an amazing experience to even think about. But because of her father's financial situation, the struggles that she had, Louisa May vowed that she will do something one day, that she doesn't care what, but if it's teaching or sewing or acting or writing, she will do anything to help her family. And she did those things. She was a teacher at one point in time, a governess, a nurse, and she was a nurse in the Civil War, actually, and contracted typhoid fever. And typhoid fever, at the time, the treatment included mercury, which gave her mercury poisoning, which plagued her for the rest of her life. But her true passion was always writing. From a very, very young age, she began writing in her journal and writing letters and short stories. And by the time that she was 10 years old, according to an Alcott scholar whose name was Madeline Stern, the Louisa had already begun searching herself and analyzing herself and describing herself by the age of 10. By 18, she was publishing she was publishing short stories in magazines for money, and it later led to publishing books and plays as well. In her writings, she used them to further her social and political causes that she got from her family. Political causes like gender equality, like racial equality, and education reform. In Little Women, these things are evident in the fact that Jo wants to be more like her father than like her mother, and that when she goes to New York, she's so frustrated because she can't make a political stance there because she's a woman. But yet all of these things, and Louisa May Alcott in her real life, she was an advocate for women's suffrage. She at times she used a male pseudonym just so that she could be more well-read and get more credibility, because that's what it was, a man's world then. But she did fight against the grain many times. She defied the odds and succeeded, and by her death at the age of 55 of pneumonia, she had over 300 works, books, plays, short stories. She never married, and like her character Jo said, that she was an old maid, a literary spinster with a pen for a spouse, a family of stories for children, and 20 years hence a morsel of fame perhaps. But she had more than a morsel of fame. Louisa May Alcott was she left a literary legacy behind her, and she supported herself in her own time in a career that was told her she couldn't do in her gender. As a woman, she was only supposed to be able to be a teacher, but she didn't. She struggled, and she made all of these stories, and they became successful. And the reason she did this, as Susan Straight explained, she made us live and breathe elsewhere for a time in the realm of her own imagined version of the March family life. She helped us believe in family unity, in fighting for political injustices and triumphing over our struggles, and standing our ground and letting our message speak through the struggles that we go through. It is my hope that we can all shine through in our lives as Louisa May Alcott did in hers.